Let's start with our prayer for study on page 185. Christ, my Lord, the giver of light and wisdom, who opened the eyes of the blind man and transformed the fishermen into wise heralds and teachers of the gospel through the coming of the Holy Spirit, shine also in my mind the light of the grace of the Holy Spirit. Grant me discernment, understanding, and wisdom in learning. Enable me to complete my assignments and to abound in every good work. For to you I give honor and glory. Amen. Most blessed Lord, send the grace of your Holy Spirit on me to strengthen me, that I may learn well the subject I am about to study, and by it become a better person, for your glory, the comfort of my family, and the benefit of your church and our nation. Amen. Very good. Let us start out with our poem. Does anybody remember Alexander Pope? And I am not upset with you if you do not. I read something briefly to you from Alexander Pope. Take that as no. It's okay. Oh, you do remember? Do you think you remember? Sort of, nebulously?
Oh, wait.
Does it sound familiar?
It's the one that he had a dream.
Oh, no. That's a good guess. It's Samuel Taylor Coleridge. It was longer ago than that. Alexander Pope was the guy who wrote that ginormous poem that I printed off, and it was so long I had to staple it together in two groups because the staple wouldn't go through it, called Essay on Man.
Oh, yeah.
And he said things like, whatever is right. And he said, the world is as good as it should be and ought to be. And you might remember that everybody's like, oh, yeah, that's awesome, you're right. And then there was that terrible earthquake in Lisbon on, it was good, it was a holy day.
All Saints Day.
All Saints Day. And just so many people died in church. And Europe's like, what? These people were at Mass and they all got killed. How is that okay with God? And so they said, oh, Alexander Pope, you are so wrong. It's not, whatever is not necessarily right. We don't like it. And a particular French guy went on the rampage named Voltaire and said he's down with the infamy was his catchphrase, and he meant Christianity by the infamy. It was terrible. Well, this is the same Alexander Pope, who later in life wrote the Essay on Man and other things. But this is a much kinder, gentler poem, and very memorizable, may I say. Not too long, if somebody's still looking. If you're in the market, I am going to keep hounding you. Like, emails will go to your parents. They will be asked, did they do their poem? But we do have many weeks left. Ode on Solitude. This seems pretty obvious what the subject of this poem is going to be. Happy the man whose wish and care a few paternal acres bound, content to breathe his native air in his own ground, whose herds with milk, whose fields with bread, whose flocks supply him with attire, whose trees in summer yield him shade, in winter fire. Blessed who can unconcernedly find hours, days, and years slide soft away, in health of body, peace of mind, quiet by day, sound sleep by night, study and ease together mixed, sweet recreation, and innocence, which most does please with meditation. Thus let me live unseen, unknown, thus unlamented let me die, steal from the world and not a stone tell where I lie. What does he want from life?
To live unseen and unknown.
Yeah, to be left alone. How's he going to make a living? How's he going to get by? Where's he going to get everything he needs?
Steal from the world, is that what you mean?
Well, steal means creep away.
Oh.
He doesn't literally mean steal. But what earlier in the poem, where's he going to get what?
That's milk and food. His fields of bread.
So where is he getting it?
Off the land.
Off the land, off his own land, right? I got my own animals, I can milk them. I got my own fields, I can grow grain. And I got my own sheep, I can shear them and make clothes. I've got everything I need. I am self-sufficient. I've got trees that shade me in the summer. I can chop them down and burn them in the fire in winter and stay warm and cook my food. Would you like that sort of life? This is not a yes or, this is an opinion, by the way. This doesn't have a right answer. Does that sound good to some of you? Like, just leave me alone. I just want,
Well, to a certain extent, you can't like be detached from all.
why not?
You kind of go crazy, right?
Do you think?
I think so. Well, okay, the hermits, they never went nuts because. Well,
Even I will tell you this. So even like Saint Anthony, or even the hermits, periodically got together with other. I realize that a convention of hermits doesn't really. It's like that's not really, but they did, to jointly worship, or, in fact, we know this happened enough because there's letters and there's writings about the desert fathers, and like one desert father would go, one hermit would go to one of the fathers and say, ooh, I just really want to roam around and get the news. I'm going to go over to so-and-so's cave because I think I heard he's sick and maybe I'll bring him something. And the desert father's always like, no, don't need to do that. You want to go check up on people. But probably the fact that you really, really, really want to go out and do something means you should just go home and be still for a while. So apparently they did this periodically. They go check on each other. But Nathan brings up something interesting. Are we made to be with other people? Do you think we're created to be with other people?
Yeah, I do.
But why do you think that? Again, this is kind of opinion. What about us makes you feel like, I'm going to say we're social. And by that I don't mean like social media. I mean, we are made to have a society of people around us. What about creation or about the normal person's life makes you think that maybe we're created for society?
First place, having language in the first place, that tells you that you have to use it for some form of communication.
You can
Else
talk
God
to
would-
yourself, but
yeah,
yes.
you can, but I wouldn't get you anywhere in for any
Right.
real reason.
The reason for language seems to me to communicate what is in here for me,
Yeah.
and it goes in your ears, and then it goes into your head, and we think the same thing. So I describe something, and now you can picture it, or I tell you something that's true, and it's like, oh, okay, I got that, I understand that. And if I was just communicating it to myself, I already know it, because it came out of me. And apparently Adam had language from the beginning, and they brought the animals to him, and he said what he would name each one. What else did God say about Adam? Right after Adam was created, and they brought the animals to him to see if any of them would be a good companion.
He needed somebody like him to be his companion.
He needed like Eve.
It is not good for man to be alone. Now, we can read into that the state of marriage is a good thing. We can also read into that being with another human being is a positive thing. So I don't know, how long have you ever been alone for an extended period of time? Because I was going to ask you, like, how long have you ever been alone? And now I'm trying to think. Maybe I've been alone 36 hours. Do you know, for example, if my husband goes away, and he's gone overnight, and I'm home alone that day and overnight and the next day, and then he comes home in the evening? I don't know if I've ever been alone for longer than 36 hours in my entire life. Have you ever? Some of you have multiple siblings, which makes it difficult. There you go.
Maybe 3 hours at the most.
Yeah. So I don't guess we're a very good test group. Like, what does it do to you if you were alone for? But there used to be a TV show, right? It wasn't. like Survivor, because they're all together, but it was some survival thing, and they were all separate.
Alone?
Was that it? Is that what it's called? My family used to watch this.
They're not alone.
Well, see, that's the thing. There's a cameraman. They should just set the camera in one place and then leave them. They should totally have to be.
Or they should just be the cameraman themselves.
They should just be the cameraman.
Yes.
Anyway, I don't know how long, but like Mary of Egypt, she would spend spent decades alone in the desert. Yeah, it seems like we're not made for solitude. This kind of goes along with the Constitution and the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers because, last week we saw Locke and Rousseau and how they said people form societies. This just naturally happens. People don't want to have to be not self-sufficient. Self-sufficient is good, but you know what I mean. Completely rely on one's own resources for everything, your emotional needs and your mental needs and everything. And plus, it's hard to defend yourself sometimes. If there's more of them than there are of you, they're probably going to win. So banding together is good. Anyway, one more note on this poem. I don't even know what to say about this little fun fact. Alexander Pope wrote this when he was 12 years old. He was 12 years old. And it's got beautiful meter and rhyme scheme. And this is exhibit 8,212. Why, we just don't have the education of people in the past. We're just not capable of things, most of us, growing up in the modern world. It's amazing. He was 12 years old. All right, spend some time with the Ode on Solitude, and maybe if you have many, many people living in your house, you can just, shut yourself in a closet with a flashlight and read the Ode on Solitude and dream. Or maybe if you want to appreciate the fact that there are many people in your house, you can read this and think, oh, but that's not what man is made for. I'm so glad I live with many people. Do with that whatever you will. Okay. I asked you to read some Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers, but I also asked you to read an excerpt from a book called Democracy in America. This is not actually it. This is a synopsis. It's an edited, not synopsis. Apparently, it's multiple volumes. It's really long. And this is the collection. This is the greatest hits of Democracy in America. So this guy, Alexis de Tocqueville, who sounds very French, was French, indeed. And in the, 1820s, 1830s, somewhere in there, he came to America and he said, I'm just going to check out America. America is not a democracy. We're going to talk about that today. But it is a democratic republic in which, well, I won't fill that in because I've asked you a question about that. And he said, I want to find out what we have to hope or to fear from this kind of government, which is kind of new in the world. This big, big country, geographically big and quite a few people, that's going to be a republic. Because the only democracies we really know, pure democracy, is Athens. It's the notorious pure democracy. The only republic we know is Rome, before it became an empire. It was a republic. And so, but de Tocqueville said, here's the thing. This is after the French Revolution, right? Okay, we've chopped off Marie Antoinette's head, and Louis' heads are gone. Napoleon has done his thing. We're past that. And he said the wave of the future in Europe seems to be this whole democracy, democratic republic. We're not really loving having kings over here. And this seems to be the direction we're headed. So America's already doing it. Maybe we should check them out and find out what kind of people it creates and how well it works. Yes, Gabriel.
Oh, wait, when was this book written?
I think he came in the 1830s, 1820s. Okay. See, why do I never? Yes. So we are a large geographical. See, when you want it, it's never there. It's a little thing that says in 18 whatever. See, now I really want to. Arrived in the United States in May of 1831 and stayed till February 1832. He stayed for 9 months and traveled around. And of course, he didn't travel the entire Northwest Territory. I mean, travel would mean basically the original colonies, the eastern seaboard, that sort of thing. Most people at that point still lived on the east side of the Mississippi River. But he wanted to find out what's the deal with America. And he made a lot of observations. And over the next few weeks, each week I've got an excerpt from him for you to read over, along with the Federalist Papers. And the question I asked you, and the title on page 61, Book 2, Chapter 8, How Equality Suggests to the Americans the Idea of the Indefinite Perfectibility of Man. That is the subject. And my question for you is, why does de Tocqueville think Americans tend to think that everything can get better than it is now? He said in this passage, and there's not a smoking gun sentence that says, because of this, everybody thinks that way. You kind of have to take in the whole thing. But he said, there's something America doesn't have that Europe has that makes them feel like things will always get better and better, and Europeans don't tend to think that way. What's the thing we're missing, according to de Tocqueville?
Was it aristocracy? Yeah, because Europe is mostly like noblemen. I mean, it started off that way, whereas America was always, there's no nobles there.
We have no titles of nobility in America. You don't get to be Duke whatever, or Prince whatever, or Lord, Count. I'm trying to think of other. Catherine probably knows many titles of nobility. You seem like the sort that would know many, many titles.
It's not incorrect.
Yeah, he says in the second paragraph on page 61, although man has many points of resemblance with the brutes, and he means the animals, one trait is peculiar to himself. He improves. They are incapable of improvement. They're capable of being trained. So the dog, when you get the dog who poos on the floor or whatever and eats your slippers, can be trained not to poo on the floor and eat your clothes, right? But he doesn't just keep getting to become a more virtuous dog after that. He does it or he doesn't do it, right? There's no, he's better and better at going outside to the bathroom. No, he either does it or he doesn't do it, and he just doesn't keep getting better and better at it. But he said people can get better and better at doing something. You can also become a better human being, And dogs, you don't just look at dogs like that dog is more virtuous than the other dog. It's just more obedient, right? So he says, we all know that people are capable of improvement. But at the end of that paragraph, it says equality did not give birth to that idea, but it has imparted it a new character. Then in the next paragraph, he says, when the citizens of a community are classed according to rank, profession, birth, or when all men are constrained to follow the career which chance has opened before them, everyone thinks that the utmost limits of human power are to be discerned in proximity to himself, and no one seeks any longer to resist the inevitable law of his destiny. I am a blacksmith because my dad was blacksmith and my grandpa was blacksmith and will always be blacksmith, and I'm never going to be Countess Mrs. Ferguson. Probably wouldn't be a blacksmith either, but because it's got limits, right? If I'm a serf, probably always going to be a serf. Once a serf, always a serf. And so I don't think I'm going to get better and better. But he says in the last paragraph on that page, in proportion as castes, classes, disappear, and the classes of society approximate, and then skipping down a little bit, it says the image of an ideal but always fugitive perfection presents itself to the human mind. Oh, I was a serf, but I worked my way up, and now I'm a blacksmith. And I'll be doggone, I'm going to go to night school. I'm going to hunker down and do the work. I'm going to be a count someday, and I'm going to have serfs and blacksmiths under me. And maybe you guys know this. This is sort of the American, Horatio Alger? Is that the guy, the Horatio Alger stories? They were a series of stories in early America about some poor kid on the streets, and he works his way up. And now he owns the factory. And they were these success stories that inspired people to become better and more than they are. And de Tocqueville says he thinks this comes because we don't have aristocracy. We don't have obvious limits to who we can be, so we think we can be anybody. What? Okay, this is so... Guys, I'm very proud of this. I've done something almost perfect. Which never happens. It's election day, and we're reading the Federalist Papers, and I've rigged it. Because 4 years from now, I'll be doing the Federalist Papers again. If I stay on this cycle, I will always be doing this during election time. It's brilliant. It was an accident. But I'm so proud of it. What do we say? What's the little proverb about who can be president? What do we say in America? Maybe we don't say it anymore. But when I was a little girl, who can grow up to be president? Anyone can grow up to be president. That's our thing. Now, is it true in reality anymore? It takes a good lot of money to become president now. It takes a lot of advertising. But once upon a time, Andrew Jackson was a hick from the backwoods, and everybody kind of made fun of him because, people came in with their dirty boots into the White House for for his parties. Dude, you hang out with Lowlife. You're the president. It's oh, these are my buddies from the woods, and they're in the White House. That's the way it used to be. It's not so much anymore. But it was our thing that anybody could have any office of government in the United States with hard work and determination and some talent, that one can become that. And they didn't talk that way in Europe. Yeah, Gabriel.
This is a little off topic, but it's kind of about Andrew Jackson.
Oh, tell us.
So apparently before he was a president, I guess he had this big duel with somebody. I don't know if anybody's heard about that.
Are you thinking of Aaron Burr?
No.
Oh, okay, because that would have been
No,
earlier.
and the guy not Jackson, he fired his bowler at him first. It hit Andrew Jackson, and then apparently he goes, "You fired your shot, now I fire mine," and then he kills him with a shot.
Really? Andrew Jackson
Yeah.
was involved in a duel?
Yep.
I didn't know.
I did not know that initially, but I found that wow.
People used to duel.
Yeah.
If you want some fun in your week, you can also look up the song called "The Battle of New Orleans." If you have never heard it, you are in for a treat. Okay. It talks about Andrew Jackson. All right. In Europe, not anybody's going to grow up to be king or count or duke or whatever. So, this is the next to last paragraph on page 62. He tells a story of an encounter he had with a sailor. And I want to know if this sounds familiar to you. And I want you to keep in mind it happened almost 200 years ago. I accost an American sailor and inquire why the ships of his country are built so as to last but for such a short time. He answers without hesitation that the art of navigation is every day making such rapid progress that the finest vessel would become almost useless if it lasted beyond a few years. In these words, which fell accidentally and on a particular subject from an uninstructed man, I recognize the general and systematic idea upon which a great people direct all their concerns. Why doesn't the sailor want to build better boats?
Because they'll just be outdated in a couple.
They'll be obsolete. Because things are getting better all the time. So why bother to make something that's going to last when we're going to make improvements in navigation and ship construction, and 5 or 10 years from now, we're just going to build another one better. We'll just scrap this baby. Do you ever hear your parents complain about things not being built to last? Okay, it seems to be getting worse.
Maybe with RC cars.
We have a maybe you do too. We have a very, very old refrigerator. And it's, well, like it's 25 years old maybe. And we have a couple of them. And it's just kind of chugging along. And a few years ago, it had a problem. And the repairman guy came. He's like, oh, I think I can get you another 18 months out of this. This was 4 years ago. It's still working. And so he said, you got a really good fridge. He's like, you know, the new ones, they don't last like this. My in-laws have a fridge that is at least 55 years old, because my husband remembers them having it in kindergarten, and he's pretty sure they got it used. It is at least 55 years, and it's still got stuff in it, in their basement. So I guess there are things which once upon a time we made to last, but I wonder if it's because, you know, what is the job of a refrigerator? This is not a trick question. To keep things cold. It's a box that stays cold. And so once you make a box that stays cold, it's like, how's it going to get better? Of course, now we have, you know, water in the door and
Cell phones on
yeah, it's just like a bunch of stuff just to go bad. You know, a bunch of stuff that will go bad. A bunch of buttons on your fridge that will go bad. But basically, maybe when they got to the point where, well, now we have a box that stays cold, then let's make a really good box to stay cold for a really long time. But now it seems to be more, well, things are changing all the time. And so you guys know this because you are the technology. You are well into one of the technology generations. And of course, we all know a certain phone or computer system, 10 years from now, they're not going to be using it. Maybe 5 years, maybe 2 years, right? It's gonna be useless before very much time passes. De Tocqueville thinks that's because we have a country with no natural societal limits. We can become whatever we want to become with hard work, determination, and some talent. And therefore, we think everything will just always get better and better. And maybe you guys don't recognize that. Does that resonate with you? Do you feel like the vibe in general is like things get better and better? Maybe not now. I mean, we've had some political troubles. No matter what happens today, somebody's going to be mad. I guarantee 100%, somebody's going to wake up tomorrow mad. I don't know who it's going to be. Somebody's going to be mad. But in general, we've had this idea of progress. So the second part of the question was, does it sound like he approves of this or disapproves of it? What did you think, and is there a particular reason you thought that? De Tocqueville, do you think that he thinks that's a...
To me, it doesn't sound like he was really siding with the son. Because for one thing, his ending was just aristocratic nations are naturally apt to narrow the scope of human perfectibility. Democratic nations, on the other hand, are kind of like it's just showing the two differences.
He does. He actually has a really good antithesis there at the end.
It is really good.
But let me read it, and let me just see if you get any vibe, positive vibe or negative vibe. And you might not even know why you're getting the vibe, but I feel like you will get a vibe. Aristocratic nations are naturally too apt to narrow the scope of human perfectibility. Democratic nations to expand it beyond reason. Is there any phrase there that gives you a hint of a vibe?
Beyond reason?
Beyond reason.
He's going to say we can never say.
Well, or maybe is it good to extend something beyond reason?
It's usually when you say beyond reason, that's already unreasonable.
It's unreasonable.
It goes,
Yeah, I think there's just this little
yeah.
dig at the end. It's like, you know what, aristocratic nations, it is true, too much narrow the scope. Democratic nations, beyond reason, expand it. They think everything will necessarily get better. why does this concern us, or why would we talk about this today? Partly because we're not debating it now. In the reading, we're debating whether or not this new Constitution is a positive thing. It said this Constitution and the laws in pursuance thereof will be the law of the land. But what if things get better and better and we come up with a better plan? We haven't. However, we have changed it, haven't we? We have come up with new plans. And what do we call it when we change the Constitution? Amendments. We add amendments. And so, for the ladies in this room, until 1930, women could not vote. We've had the vote for less than 100 years of our history. They decided that was not a good thing. Of course, you probably know, black people were not given the vote. Black people were not given full citizenship. They amended the Constitution to make sure that happened. They said, this is wrong. We should change that. You might not know, voting age was lowered to 18 by an amendment. So we have gotten new ideas, but we haven't gotten to the point where we say, oh, we got a totally new idea. But maybe with that mindset, could it happen? Will we send delegates somewhere and they close the windows and doors and write a whole new government? I don't know. Probably not. All right. When people live together, we said earlier that people are made to live together. Locke and Rousseau said people naturally tend to band together because then you can protect your stuff better and people won't beat you up. If they do, you can send your friends. You can send not your friends, you can send the government to do something to them. What happens frequently when a group of people get together? This is a very nebulous question. It could have any answer.
Problems occur.
Okay, what sort of problems might occur when
Conflict within the entire circle.
conflict?
With
For,
privacy, yeah.
for example, some of you have largish families. May I assume that there might sometimes be conflict? Is there ever conflict when a group of you want one thing and a group of you want something else? Like we have X number of votes for pizza and X number of votes for Chinese food or something of that nature. I feel like this could easily happen. What do we call that group of all of them that all want pizza? What would we call them politically? That's funny. What do the Federalists and Anti-Federalists call them? Factions. A faction. A group of people who bind together and we all want the same thing and we're going to work together to get it. Only problem is, in general, there's another group of people that don't want that thing and they're going to push back, right? Well, if you have a country with a faction that is particularly large, a faction that's more than half, what might happen to the people who don't want pizza? What might happen to the minority group?
They could just never win.
Yeah, you'll eat pizza and like it. I'm going to put pineapple and anchovies on it and make you eat it. You will eat the pizza. The majority can make the minority do what they want. And obviously, when you set it up that everybody gets a vote, it seems like, wait a minute. If you can just pull a majority over to your side, you're golden. And you can just push those minority people. And by minorities, I don't mean like ethnic group minority. I mean anytime it's not the majority. We can push them around. Well, the Federalist paper writers and the writers of the Constitution understood this completely. They knew this happens. And that's basically what we explored this week in the readings. What about the fact that when people have a vote, if more people vote for pizza, then the lesser people, there's no Chinese food for you. It's pizza tonight. And in a family, I mean, probably your family is not a democracy. Probably your parents say what they want and they get it. But if they're nice, if they're feeling benevolent, maybe they take a poll. I don't know. It doesn't mean they have to obey. They might they seem like benevolent rulers, but really it's a dictatorship. You just feel pacified because you were asked to vote, but really it didn't. No, I'm sure none of your parents are like that at all. Okay, so let's take a look at Federalist 10. That's the first group. This is on page 63. The first question I asked you is what, and I just basically blow this question up. You don't even have to look. If you listen to me at all in the last 5 minutes, you already know the answer. What is the principal vice of popular governments? By the way, that doesn't mean popular like Taylor Swift is popular. It means based on the votes of the people. Popular comes from people. Okay? What's the principal vice?
Instability, injustice.
And what did those all come from?
Conflicting factions.
Conflicting factions. Faction. Madison, and I feel like we should listen to him. He's the author of number 10. He's also the author of the Constitution. I feel like he's got some weight here. Yeah, he says, among the numerous advantages promised by a well-constructed union, none deserves to be more accurately developed than its tendency to break and control the violence of faction. This new government we are offering you for your approval, everybody, it deals with the problem of faction. And yes, it says instability, injustice, confusion, these all arise from faction. Okay, so you got a group of people and they're all together. We have two ways. This is the second question I asked you. According to Madison, there's two ways to get rid of the problems of faction. Two ways to deal with faction. What are our two options, Gabriel?
Removing its cause or controlling its effects.
We only have two options. Remove the cause so that it never happens, or control it after it happens. I can't think of a third. Make it not happen, or deal with it after it happens. I can't think of a third. It seems pretty exhaustive. Now, he turns around. I did not really ask you to write this in the question, but does anybody remember, what are the two ways to keep it from happening?
Destroying liberty is one of them, right?
Okay, destroy liberty. Don't give anybody any choice. Do we like that option?
No.
That's a bad option. What's the other way of removing it?
Give every citizen the same opinion.
Make everybody a robot that all agrees with everybody else. Like all, zap your brains or whatever. So you all want pizza, or you all. Do you want to be a robot? Do you want to surrender your liberty?
No.
I feel like those are bad options. So I already answered the second half. Which of these two choices is impractical, if not impossible? I don't think we can give everyone the same opinions unless we turn them into, brainwash them. And I don't think we want to all just surrender our freedom to have an opinion. That sounds like some dystopian future novel, right? Doesn't sound good at all. So we're left with control its effects. If remove its causes, no, we don't like that. Control its effects, that's what we're going to have to do. So, Madison already told us that a well-constructed union will break and control the violence of faction. He said, we can't stop it from happening, but we're setting up a government that will control its effects. So before we investigate how it does that, please, can somebody tell me what is the difference between a republic and a democracy?
Democracy is directly ruled by the people's vote, whereas republic is a representative government.
Okay, that's the difference. He says, a pure democracy, by which I mean a society consisting of a small number of citizens who assemble and administer the government in person, can admit of no cure for the mischief of faction. Imagine that every time the government does anything, every single person in the United States goes out and votes on it. They want to pass a new tax, everybody votes. Oh, we don't even have to go to that. Let's imagine that everybody in the city of Moline votes on everything. You want to pave that street? Everybody, all 65, 70,000 of them go vote. You want to, I don't know, hang a new sign on the interstate? Everybody goes out and votes. You want to close a particular store because, I don't know, there are rats or something? Everybody votes. You've got to count the votes. Who always is going to win? The majority. Done. There's no way to keep the majority from always winning. By the way, why do we not go out and just all of us vote for everything?
That'd be really tiresome.
It would be very tiresome. If every time the government wanted to do anything, everybody had to vote. This is why he just said a small, what was it? Democracy, a small number of citizens. Holy cow, you can't do that if you've got hundreds of thousands of people voting on everything. It's lunacy. This is why Athens, I told you Athens was the model. This is a democracy. They estimate at most 6,000 voting citizens, not women, not slaves, and not people that just live, well, like aliens living there, not illegal, but just like immigrants living in Athens but aren't citizens, full citizens. So maybe 6,000 people could go out. Okay, that you can do. They just put like colored rocks in bowls. So like dump out the rocks and put them in piles and count them. You could count to 6,000. If you had several counters, you could do that pretty fast. So that democracy, he says, okay, small number of people and the majority will always win. A republic, by which I mean a government in which the scheme of representation takes place, opens a different prospect and promises the cure for which we are seeking. Cure for what? Faction. Breaking the effects of faction. He said it's representative government that will do that. Okay. He says, the two great points of difference between a democracy and a republic are, first, the delegation of the government in the latter, he means in the republic, to a small number of citizens elected by the rest. Secondly, the greater number of citizens and greater sphere of country over which the latter may be extended. What's different about our republic? Two things. First, we have delegated authority to a small group of people. Second, we got a whole lot of citizens, way more than you could have if everybody was going to vote. Okay. And he claims this is going to help with the problem of faction. How? Well, he says, first of all, and you might find this charming and naive. I fear maybe I do. The effect of the first difference, a chosen small number of people administering the government, the effect of this is, on the one hand, to refine and enlarge the public views by passing them through the medium of a chosen body of citizens whose wisdom may best discern the true interest of their country. What kind of people will these be that we choose to administer our government, according to Madison? What will they be like?
Their wisdom may best discern the true interest.
They're going to
He
be
thinks they're going to be great.
They're going to be wise. They're going to be the best of the best. They're going to be really good, wise people who will make excellent decisions, not only for themselves, but for the country as a whole. They will have the best interests of their country at heart. I will leave it up to you to decide for yourselves whether or not the people we tend to choose are like that. But that was the goal, right? So, Senate, senatus, senex means old man. Senex is an old man. And, you know, we like young people in modern times. Like everybody, like women don't want to look old, and so, I don't know, they color their hair and, I don't know, have facelifts and stuff, because nobody wants to be old. But in the ancient times, like, old was good, because it meant you had a little more wisdom, a little more experience, you ought to be listened to, and the young people, it's like, oh, I don't listen to them, they're crazy, they don't know what they're talking about. And now we're kind of backwards. And Madison's like, we'll elect the wise, the elder statesman. Remember the age limits? A representative can be 25. Senator has to be 30. You're going to be a senator when you're 18. Don't have enough life experience and wisdom yet. Does anybody know, did we read, how old, 35, president? Does president have to be 35? Did it say in the Constitution, or is it an amendment? There's a limit on how old the president has to be. I can't remember what it is.
I didn't see it in the Constitution.
So we expect that the people we elect are going to be wiser. Okay, that's what Madison said. This is one reason it will help. Because all those crazy factions, they'll run all their ideas through this chosen group of people who will evaluate what they want in a wise way. Okay, the second thing he said, the great number of citizens. Well, let's see how that helps. It says, each representative will be chosen by a greater number of citizens in the large republic. It will be more difficult for unworthy candidates to practice with success the vicious arts. You can fool a few people, but it's hard to fool lots of people and get yourself elected. Again, I'll leave that to your discretion. But he said there's something else cool about having a huge, huge country. Remember, at this point, we're not living really all the way to the West Coast, but we own all the way to the West Coast. And Lewis and Clark have already been there. No, that's de Tocqueville. At this point, we don't own that. I'm sorry, I'm confusing the two books. We don't even own that. We own the Mississippi River, basically. He said, but that's still a lot. It's huge. It's a huge country. It's bigger than a European country. And he says, the smaller the society, the fewer probably will be the distinct parties and interests composing it. Okay, so in a family, how many factions are there for dinner? Well, I mean, you could each individually want something separate from everybody else, but good luck with that. Generally, there's not going to be, if you've got 10 people in your family, it might be 6 to 4, 5 to 5. It's probably going to be 2 and 2 and 2 and 2 and 2, Again, good luck with that. That's just why your parents are not, it's not a democracy. It's very more likely in a group of 10 people, 20 people, 50 people, you're going to have two sides. What about in a group of 1 million people? It's probably going to be more than 2 opinions. All right? The more people, the more opinions. Like this group of people wants it this way. This group wants it, I'll go with the dinner, even though 1 million people are not going to have dinner together. Maybe we got, 100,000, 150,000 for pizza. We got 75,000 over here for the Chinese, but we got, another 125,000 going Mexican on us. And so it's harder for one group. Do you see where I'm going? It'll be really harder for one group of people, for like 501,000 people, to all decide they want the same thing and work together to get it. Madison is telling us this government is going to control faction. Now, I think this is in 51. Just a second. Again, if I wear the glasses, it's so much easier. Let me see if it's in 51, the comment that I wanted to make. Oh, I don't see it. Just a second. Oh, yeah, it is. Okay. So, before we move on to 51, is it still true? Oh, let me read what he said. Extend the sphere and you take in a greater variety of parties and interests, you make it less probable that the majority of the whole will have a common motive to invade the rights of other citizens, or that if such a common motive exists, it will be, listen to this part, it will be more difficult for all who feel it to discover their own strength and act in unison with each other. So we got, 100 people in Massachusetts that want pizza, and we got another 400 in Georgia that want pizza. How are they ever going to find each other? They don't even know the other one exists. Is that still true? What changed that?
Like social media, basically.
The internet, I would say. I mean, first we have phones. Do you know that when they built the first telegraph, so telegraph, the line, it was like from New England to somewhere in the South, okay? And it was like Maine to Alabama, I don't remember. It was a good long way. And somebody said now I'll just use Maine and Alabama, even though I don't know which states it was. Now somebody from Maine can talk to somebody in Alabama. And someone else said, well, does somebody in Maine have anything to say to somebody in Alabama? It's like, they're fishermen. They're like catching lobsters up in Maine. In Alabama, they're plantations. Like, what in the world do these people have in common? Why would they even want to talk to each other? Well, those differences have sort of faded away, haven't they, the regional differences? And now, if you are okay, I'm sure you all have some sort of hobby. You can think it in your head what that particular thing is you enjoy. Be honest with me. Have you found other people on the internet that like the same thing? Probably most of you have. I follow, like there's a lady who makes awesome miniature food. Amazing. Works of art. It's like, and all the crazy people who like miniature food or dollhouses, it's like we're all, and then she's got like 500,000 followers or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Suddenly we all found each other. And if we wanted to, I don't know, have a movement of dollhouse owners and take over the world or something, maybe we could. We're too busy looking at the miniature food and we don't have time. Yeah, I think that Madison, one thing they did not realize was that technology would make it easy for us to find like-minded people. You want to organize a flash mob somewhere. You know what I mean? It's like done. Done. That wasn't happening in Madison's time. Okay, let's move on to 51. This was also written by Madison. And it's related to how this government is going to control faction. What does he say the job of the constituent parts of the government are? What is the job of each part of the government? It's in the very first paragraph. Oh, yeah, Gabriel, go for it.
Is it to keep the others in their proper place?
Yeah, keep everybody in line. It's the job of the executive to tell the legislative and judicial, stay in your lane. Do not come over here. It's the job for each one to keep the other ones in check. And this is the point of the idea of balance of powers. I do want to go there right now. How is the whole controlling faction related to the balancing powers? Are those ideas related to each other? Do they have anything to do with each other? You know they do because I had you read them in the same week. Because you gave them both to us, Mrs. Ferguson. That's not the right answer. That's true.
Is it because the different factions can affect the powers above them? Like through now the Democratic Republican, those are actually, they can technically be factions.
Yeah. What if a faction takes over the legislative? And I mean, really, our political parties are not much more than factions at this point. I don't think they were not seeing the. I mean, they had parties, they had political parties from the very beginning, but it wasn't like this. That's very strongly. It's very hard for there to become a third faction. The independent candidates try to get on the ballot, but they just never get enough votes to really matter. So we basically kind of got these two warring factions. And so we know what happens, don't we? Because it happens, generally someone's in control of the House, one faction, someone's in control of the Senate. But what's the job of the judicial and executive? To tell the legislative, mind your own business. You can't do that. Do you see? So if a faction arises in one group, presumably there's two other groups keeping eagle eyes on them and keeping them in check. Does that make sense? That's why they're all off on this balance of powers, balance of powers. Why are they so enamored of it? Because they think that that will be a guard against one group of people in this country taking over and just making the minority do anything they want. It remains to be seen. We have situations, come tomorrow or whenever they get everything counted, sometimes the president, the executive, is of the same faction that is currently controlling the legislature. What about the legislature? What if a faction takes over the House of Representatives? Is there any balance for that? Is the House of Representatives the only part of the legislative branch?
No.
What does it have that could balance it out? What's the other half? The Senate. So they even balanced the legislative. He in fact says, I think I asked you this question. Yeah, it's the last question on page 63. What branch of government predominates? I just basically blew that one out. The legislative, because it's a lot of power to make laws for people. You've just said what everyone has to do, including the president and the Supreme Court justices. You've passed a law for everybody, not just for yourselves or they are citizens too, but you know what I mean. Every branch of government has to. It's very powerful. So he says, well, how do we fix that? Don't give one group of people the power to make the laws. Give it to two groups at the same time. And they've got to both agree. And if one of them says that in the House, I want to do something, and the Senate says, nix on that, they've got to work together. So it's not very complicated, but they felt like they produced this perfect balancing act where everybody's watching another group and says, you can't do that, don't step over the line. Does that make sense? Yeah, here's how he puts it. The great security consists in giving to those who administer each department the necessary constitutional means and personal motives to resist the encroachments of the others. All right. What? I did not ask that question. Oh, yes, I did. Okay. Under what circumstances would no government be necessary? If men were angels. This is a very famous line. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. In framing a government, which is to be administered by men over men, not angels, the great difficulty lies in this. And this was the second part of that question. What two things do you have to make the government do? This was right after the angels comment. Mm-hmm.
Must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place oblige it to control itself.
Control the governed and control itself. Madison is not living in a dream world where people are perfect, even though that it was, I shouldn't have said it was charming or called it naive or whatever I did, that we will elect the best citizens and they will administer the country for us and all our ideas will be run through this wise body of people. But Madison isn't stupid. he realizes that there are going to be times when that wise body of people consists of not so wise people. Or wise but clever. Do you know what I mean? And so they are smart enough to get things done, but also wicked enough to do it for their own purposes. He knows this. So he says we have to have a government that controls the governed, or there's no point in having a government. But it has to control itself. This is his balance of powers. This is the thing he thinks is going to fix the problem of faction. Okay, just a second. Let me see. Okay, let's just move on to that last question. How does the large size, we touched on this already once, how does the large size of the United States protect its citizens from being ruled by majority factions? We kind of already said this, yes, Neil.
Because of the different races, cultures, and ideas, people are not likely to form factions.
Yeah. We're so different from each other. There's so many of us. And we're so different from each other. He says, society will itself be broken into so many parts, interests, and classes of citizens, that the rights of individuals or of the minority will be in little danger from interested combinations of the majority. Maybe not true anymore, because it's so easy for us to find each other. Interestingly, before we move into Samuel and find out what he thinks about this balance of powers and whole, faction thing, de Tocqueville actually mentioned this whole idea too. He actually quotes Federalist 51 at great length. I'm not going to read, it's a couple of paragraphs of it, but he says, if ever the free institutions of America are destroyed, that event may be attributed to the omnipotence of the majority, which may at some future time urge the minorities to desperation and oblige them to have recourse to physical force. Anarchy will then be the result, but it will have been brought about by despotism. Okay, guys, I don't know if you heard what I read. This is terrifying because I feel like it's becoming more and more a possibility. If the free institutions of America are destroyed, he said, it will be attributed to an omnipotent majority, which may at some future time urge the minorities to desperation and oblige them to have recourse to physical force, violence. If you get a powerful enough majority and there's a pretty rabid minority that feels very strongly about the right of their cause, de Tocqueville says they may just start stockpiling guns. I'm not recommending this. I'm not inciting, don't go home and... Mrs. Ferguson says that if we don't like the faction that wins, we should just, start looting and burning. No, I didn't. De Tocqueville said, if it ever happens in America that things start to fall apart, it's going to be because some majority had a stranglehold and the minority became desperate. They said, this is wrong, this is wicked, this is evil, and they don't know what to do to get their voice heard. So they take to the streets. Almost 200 years ago, he said that. And of course, only 30 years after that, we did have a civil war. People did take to the streets. People did pick up guns and shoot their fellow citizens. And we had a horrible, devastating civil war. And it was faction, right? The minority in that case was the Southern slaveholders who felt threatened. Even though Lincoln said, I'm not going to do anything, with your slaves. It was like, yes, you will. So we're going to shoot at Fort Sumter and start a war. But it was that, a minority who felt threatened and in desperation resorted to violence. So, that's not a very fun thing to talk about. It's like, oh, everybody's scared to wake up in the morning now. Don't be scared. But it's very prescient of de Tocqueville. Just that this, I think this is the direction. So how does he agree? The Federalist writers, Madison, who wrote the Constitution, said the big, big vice and problem to deal with is faction. And de Tocqueville came 50 years later and said the big problem in America is going to be faction. He said, let me see if I even want to bother to read this. Yeah, I might go back to that if we have time. Let's take a look at sentinel now. What is a sentinel? It's a guard. Like, he put the sentinels on the walls of the castle, and I would think of it as being an old-fashioned sort of word. It's a guard. Sentinel calls himself sentinel. What do you think he's guarding? What do you think the anti-federalists think they're guarding?
Essentially their country.
Our freedom. Our freedom. They say, in general, the anti-federalists altogether say, these guys have written a document and they want us to turn into a country where this all-encompassing federal government is just going to eat us alive. And we just barely got away from England. Are you kidding me? So they are, Sentinel is guarding American freedom. Okay, let me find Sentinel. Okay. Why does Sentinel not believe that a government built on balancing powers will last? Because remember, this is the big thing, like the Federalists, like, oh, we will control faction, balance of powers, no one will take over. And Sentinel says, it's not a direct quote from Sentinel. Why does he think it will never last? Mm-hmm.
If the administrators of every government are formed of views of private interest, how will they be for the common good?
Mm-hmm. Because human beings will run this government. Do you really not think they're going to do things for their own interests? He says, Sentinel says this. He says, Mr. Adams, sine qua non of a good government. Sine qua non is a Latin phrase which means literally without which not. It means something you have to have. A sine qua non of a Christmas dinner is the turkey. It's a sine qua non. Maybe not for your family. Thanksgiving, maybe, is a sine qua non. You got to have turkey. And he says his sine qua non of a good government is 3 balancing powers. That's his thing. Oh, got to have balanced powers. And Sentinel says, if such an organization of power were practicable, how long would it continue? Not a day. For there is so great a disparity in the talents, wisdom, and industry of mankind that the scale would presently preponderate to one or the other body, and with every accession of power, the means of further increase would be greatly extended. Look, says Sentinel. Seriously. Do you think all people are equally smart and talented? I don't, says Sentinel. And you know those talented, super smart people are going to wiggle their way in, and they're going to take over one branch. And the more power they get, the easier it is to get more power. Do you not think that a group of like-minded, super clever people are going to get together and just throw the whole balance out of whack? Of course they are. It's going to happen almost right away, he says. The balance is a joke. It's an illusion, says Sentinel. What characteristic form of government does Sentinel believe is best calculated for freemen, and in what form of government is it found? What kind of government does Sentinel want us to have?
Like a free government almost.
Yes, well, he says, but it's best suited for freemen.
Yeah, I
So that would kind of be a tautology, wouldn't it? Say a free government is the best government for free
Exactly.
people.
Yeah.
All right, let me read it, and then you tell me. But you have to tell me. So listen. I believe it will be found, the best government will be found, that the form of government which holds those entrusted with power in the greatest responsibility to their constituents. Can you say that in another way? The government that holds those entrusted with power in the greatest responsibility to their constituents. It's got a lot of fancy political talk in there, but what's it mean?
Yeah, I was gonna say, what's constituent?
The constituents are the people who elect you. The people. So let's little by little decode it. The government which holds those entrusted with power in the greatest responsibility to the people that elected them. Who are those entrusted with power? Okay, the people we elected. So, which holds the people elected in the greatest responsibility to the people who elected them. How do you think people who get elected are held in responsibility to the people who elected them? What is that? How would we say that? Well, yeah, but what do we use a phrase? Held accountable. Answerable to. He says, the best calculated for freemen, the best government, is a government in which those elected are answerable to the people who elected them. Directly answerable. And then I said, in what sort of government? Skipping down, he says, no, it's not, in his opinion. The highest responsibility is to be attained in a simple structure of government. If you complicate the plan by various orders, the people will be perplexed and divided in their sentiments about the source of abuses or misconduct. Okay, so we have a club. Welcome, you're all in the club. It's the Miniature Food Club. And all been elected. And so I'm the president. And you all pay dues to the Miniature Food Club, when we meet every month. And then I buy cool miniature food and we display it and we enjoy it together. But the money seems to be disappearing. And we're not buying any miniature food. And who are you going to blame for that? Me, because I'm the only person in charge. It's a simple form of government, isn't it? If the money disappears, y'all start looking at me. However, we're going to change the club. I am president, but everybody at that table is the board of directors. And you've chosen 2 leaders of the board of directors who work together with the Miniature Food Search Committee, which is this table over here. And then Miriam, I don't know what Miriam's going to do. Miriam's the secretary. And she takes care of the treasury, too. She's treasurer and secretary. Okay, so now it's not simple anymore, is it? Now money starts to disappear. And we're all, which one of you is it? Is it the board? Is it the leaders of the board? Is it the treasurer? I don't know. Is it the Miniature Food Search Committee? I have no idea who to blame. Do you see? This is what Sentinel is saying. You got all these powers. Great. Good for you, Madison. You got the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. And the legislative has 2 parts. And the House has a speaker. And there's a vice president. There's a cabinet that goes along with the president. Are you kidding me? So when the country is being run into the ground, who am I supposed to blame? Says Sentinel. I have no idea. Who do I fire? Who do I re-elect and who do I get rid of? Do I just get rid of all of them and start over completely if somebody goes bad? Is it plain what he means? Like, you've got to have a simple, he's like, we just need a president and a little, council to get things done. Boom. All these houses and branches and whatnot. He said, they're just a cover for people that want to take advantage of us. And then we won't know who to blame. That's Sentinel's position. What danger does Sentinel see in giving Congress power to tax for the general welfare. Because it says in the Constitution, Congress has the power to tax for X, Y, Z, and the general welfare. What's wrong with that, according to Sentinel?
He says it's a form of oppression because they can enforce it with, using the army.
Yeah, they could, but that could apply to all taxes. Why particularly? He's all off on this general welfare. Let me find. Congress may oh well, no, that's the answer to the question. He quotes the Constitution, and then he says they can tax whatever taxes, duties, and excises that they may deem requisite for the general welfare may be imposed on the citizens of these states, levied by officers of Congress. What's wrong with that? I'm taking up a collection. Fill my ball for the general welfare. It's a collection for the general welfare. What's your next question of me? Somebody knocks on your door and says, I'm collecting for the general welfare.
What is the general?
Hello, what is the general welfare? Exactly? According to Sentinel, anything Congress wants it to be. That's what he says. He says, the Congress may construe every purpose for which the state legislatures now lay taxes to be for the general welfare, and thereby seize upon every object of revenue. You got to remember, the states already had taxes. We still do. Those of us who live in Illinois, if you have a job, summer job, like Illinois takes all your money, and then they even make you pay. Like you have a part-time summer job, and then you end up owing the state of Illinois taxes. Like you're a teenager, you earned $1,500, and Illinois wants your money. Are you kidding? But Sentinel says, wait a minute. States collect taxes to run the states right now. But what if the federal government comes in and says, hey, give us that, it's for the general welfare? Where are the states going to get the money? Like, nope, you can't have that money. That will be for the general welfare. Thank you. He really, really doesn't like the term general welfare. It's just not very specific. And if you think about it, it's not. He's got a point. Congress can just pass any tax and say this is for the general welfare. They have that power under the Constitution. Okay. What does Sentinel think will happen to the states, the state legislatures and courts, if they adopt the Constitution? What's going to happen to the states?
Invested in the general government.
Yeah, they're going to disappear.
Small little.
Yeah, they're just going to swallow them up. He says, he points out this part of the Constitution that says, by fourth section of the first article, the times, now he's quoting from the Constitution, the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof, but the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations, except as to the place of choosing senators. That's the end of the quote. The plain construction of which is that when the state legislatures drop out of sight from the necessary operation of this government, then Congress are to provide for the election and appointment of representatives and senators. He said they're already preparing the way. They're saying, oh, states can do this, except Congress can change the elections. He says, what if we decide that every state election, you all have to go to Springfield? We all have to travel to Springfield. That actually wouldn't be too bad, because it's sort of in the middle, you know? What if we all have to travel to Chicago or Cairo or something? You know what I mean? Like a bunch of, it's like, no, I'm sorry, I can't go there today. He said, Congress could do that. But your election is here. And he said, they're just paving the way to absorb the states. Did that happen? Do we still have states?
Yeah.
We do. And do states still have powers?
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe not as many as they once had. I don't know if you guys know this, but up until the Civil War, United States was plural. The United States are a free country. And after the Civil War, they said the United States is a free country. It became singular. A lot of people would argue, we're not going to talk a lot about the Civil War. We are going to read Huck Finn, which has to do with pre-Civil War, you know, South. But a lot of people argue that the Civil War sort of changed states forever. It was the last big, a group of states said, you can't do that to us, you don't have the power. And then the federal government said, oh, yes, we can, and we will. And sort of absorbed it. So now people don't take states as seriously as they used to, maybe. So maybe Sentinel had a point. But they didn't get absorbed. There is still a state of Iowa. There's still a state of Illinois. It has its own government. Okay. Why does Sentinel think a single federal government is not practical or safe for such a large country? Because remember, largeness, that's what the Federalists are all about. Hey, it's so big that you can't ever bound together so many people to make such a powerful faction that it will take over. It's great that it's big. What does Sentinel think about the size? Yeah, Neil, go for it.
I think this might be it. From the investigation of this government, it appears to be devoid of all responsibility or accountability to the great body of people. It would be in practice a permanent aristocracy.
Okay. That partly is because it's very hard for them to be accountable to such a large group of people. Honestly, well, you aren't old enough to vote, but maybe hear your parents. Well, I'm going to vote later today. How well do you think I know personally everybody who's running for representative? Do you think I know everything about them?
No.
Are they good people? Are they bad people? Are they liars? Are they cheats? Are they just amazing? I don't know them. You see, when it's a large country, the chances of me personally knowing the person in charge, I do not know Trump. I do not know Harris. I don't know them. They don't just live down the street. I don't see them taking out their trash and chat with them. But if you live in a small country, you do, right? Sentinel, though, thought something else in addition to that. He said, and it's kind of an appeal to authority, it is the opinion of the greatest writers that a very extensive country cannot be governed on democratical principles, on any other plan than a confederation of a small number of small republics. He said, you know what, people who know about politics say, first of all, you can't have a huge democracy for the aforementioned reasons, because we can't all go out and vote. You can't have a republic this big unless we had a loose confederation of the states, which is what they had before, the Articles of Confederation. He says the only way you can govern it. He says, yeah, and then, Neil, about a permanent aristocracy. I'm trying to find, okay. It would not be difficult to prove that anything short of despotism could not bind so great a country under one government, and that whatever plan you might at first setting out establish, it would issue in despotism. How in the world are you going to get millions of people to all obey the same group of people, all obey the same laws? You're going to have some sort of tyrant and make them do it. They're never going to do that. You're never going to get millions of people to all obey one government. We might get everybody to obey the state of Iowa or the state of Illinois or Pennsylvania or whatnot. You'll never, ever, ever get them all to obey. Why? Because we're so different from each other. We have such different interests, you know? So when I was a little girl, I think I said this yesterday. I don't think I said this to you guys. I'm sure I have at some point. So I lived in Alaska, when I was little. And Alaska's really far away. It's really, really big. And it's really, really far away. And the general feeling there was not friendly to the federal government, because they thought, those people down there, they're so far away, they have no idea what life here is like. It wasn't not true. We have a certain way of life, and there was a political candidate not very many years ago who was made fun of and mocked because he said something about Russia being so close to Alaska. It was 30 miles. At the closest point, Russia is 30 miles from Alaska. and everybody made fun of her. I mean, she said, like, I can see Russia from my backyard. And she didn't mean literal. I mean, it was, but she means from Alaska, and it's true. And everybody down here thought it was a joke. It's like, do you know? It's really, really close. So that feeling that they still have in Alaska was kind of the feeling that Sentinel felt like everybody would have, right? What do you people in Washington, D.C. know about my problems in the Midwest or on the ranches of Montana or the Gulf Coast fishermen or whatever? What do you know? And again, sometimes we do feel like that as Americans, right? We live in a certain place and we say, the people don't understand. This is not a question I asked you, what's the cure for that? What's supposed to happen so that somebody there does know how Iowa and Illinois farmers live and how they feel? What do we do to guarantee that somebody in Washington, D.C. understands what life is like here?
Like a representative?
We send representatives. And presumably, they will stick up for us and say, you're proposing this, but the farmers in Iowa, that's not going to help. That's not going to be good for them. It's not going to help them. And in a perfect world, that's the way it would work. Of course, now we feel like maybe sometimes we send people and they forget, and they do things for their own interests. But not everybody. I don't want to sour you on government. Do you know what I mean? But remember, if men were angels, we wouldn't need it. So before I leave you, this is what I want you to write. It's a Summa week. 1 paragraph. And it is, where is it? There we go. Would we need a government if there were no sin? Would we need a government if there were no sin? If you think yes, we still would, because there is an argument to be made for that, right? We still have to work together. What would it look like? Or if you think we wouldn't need any government at all, why do you think that? Give me some specific examples. It would be a bonus, gold star bonus, if you mentioned something the Federalist or Anti-Federalist writers said. You could use the angel's quote. That's it. 250 to 300 words. Does government reflect our sin? Or is government that, hey, when you get a group of people together, you got to organize them somehow? And bring that back to me next week. The 3 things you're going to read are in your book, 2 Federalist and 1 Anti-Federalist. It's in your reading guide. And also there's another Democracy in America excerpt for you to read and answer some questions. That's it. Any questions at all? Are we good?
Do you put antithesis and parallelism one?
No, just in 1 paragraph. If you want to, more power to you. But don't kill yourself over that. All right, it's all right. Anything else?
You said how many words?
Like 250 to 300 words. It usually makes a decent paragraph. I think it usually turns out to be a third of a page or something.
Do we need to do like opening and ending paragraphs or just that?
No, just that one. You're just responding to a simple question.
Okay.
I just want your thoughts. And it helps you sort of coalesce your thoughts and put them into a readable, understandable form. All right, that's it.